All right, welcome to MVP Days, everyone. Our online edition. Everybody knows what's going on in the world here, and us as a community, especially the Azure Stack, Azure Stack HCI, Azure everything community, are so pleased for everyone to be able to join us. I'm so lucky to be joined by my fellow co-presenter, Mr. John O'Neill Sr. My name is Dave Kawula. And we are here to talk to you today about something very special, which is Windows Defender Advanced Threat Protection, specifically for our core critical infrastructure. So with that, John, I'll hand it over yourself for a quick introduction, and we'll go ahead and get started.
Thanks, Dave. And I am also so excited to be here. Working from home these days during self-isolation. So I'm excited to get out and participate with the community in an event like this. So that's about all I have to say to intro. I'm excited to get in and have our conversation and our presentation.
Now, I got a question for you, John. When you're looking at technologies like this, it's important to step outside of Contoso land and do this in production. So I'm actually really pleased to let everyone know that we've been working together on a large-scale production rollout of Defender Advanced Threat Protection, Office ATP, and all of the Microsoft Security Suite together for about the last 6-7 months. And so this is a little bit of our notes from the field as well as just a session, right?
Absolutely. And that's what I really enjoy is moving out of the ideal environment of Contoso and seeing if it holds up to all the hype out in the field. And I think you and I both agree it absolutely does. And that's what we're here to share today.
So I think during this session, you've actually prepared a few samples for us of some sample alerts that we've seen coming through, as well as some of the operational emails and things like that that we send out when we actually have an incident that we need to respond to, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a big part of a strong security response team, if you will, is communication, right? A big part of any team is communication. So we have to standardize that. We have to make sure that it's something that is easily recognizable and understood by employees and all those things. And we're going to get into that today.
Awesome. Well, let's take a look at our agenda that we have. Let me see if I can advance my slides here, see if technology will work for me here today. So what we got in this jam-packed session, we're going to try to get this done in about 30 minutes or so, is we're going to go through a quick overview of Windows Defender Advanced Threat Protection, and maybe not exactly in this particular order, because I think I may have mixed up some of the slides. That might have been my fault. We're going to talk a little bit about the Security Center, so the Microsoft's dashboard and portal that we've got for Defender Advanced Threat Protection. And then more importantly, some long-term protection techniques by using what we call a fabric. And we'll discuss that in a minute. We won't let the rabbit out of the bag just yet here. And we're going to talk about why that portion is important, combining not only rigid security practices as well as seeing what we can do to fix existing environments. So that's what we've got for everyone today, John. So let's go ahead and get started here. So the number one thing that I think that you should take away from the session is your existing environment that you have is more than likely compromised. Would you agree with that statement? That's a pretty bold statement that I'm making there, John. But if you've been running an Active Directory domain in an Active Directory forest for any extended period of time, that environment's connected to the internet and it's been running, there's a strong likelihood that you've had some type of a compromise at some point in time, or there's an attacker that's waiting in the weeds, waiting to come and get you. And this produces a very interesting quandary that we have as what I'll call fabric administrators, because we're supposed to build hardened and secured infrastructure, but if your home is messy and you go to bring new stuff into it, everything's just going to continue to be cluttered and messy. So our theory is, why not start in a brand new, fresh world where we can reduce the amount of domain administrators. Just a virtual show of hands of you out there. How many of you listening to this video today have a problem with privileged access inside of your environments? You know, we all like to say that we control the domain administrators that we have out there, but a lot of us are in situations where those decisions were maybe made long before we ever started working inside of these environments, and we have too many administrators inside of the infrastructure. Okay. The second one is that maybe you don't have multi-factor authentication enabled, and you should do this on all your systems inside of the fabric. Well, we had a situation, John, which was twofold for one of my customers. I actually just did a webinar for Veeam. I think it was just earlier this week, actually. And basically what we talked about was the fact that, you know, we had this Azure Stack HCI infrastructure installed into the primary domain for this one particular customer, and the attacker was able to get domain administrative access through a pass the hash attack technique, and they ended up gaining access to all of our Azure Stack HCI infrastructure, all of our backup infrastructure, everything that we had inside of there. And so what they ended up doing is, you know, this attack wasn't even so much of a ransom as more of a destruction exercise. They were going around destroying clusters, destroying backup targets, you know, breaking things. So how do you prevent that from happening? Well, having an alternative set of credentials and a separate Active Directory force and domain is a great starting point. And the interesting point is that, you know, if you're in an environment like this where everything's installed in a single domain right now, and you don't think you have the ability to do this, well, starting in Server 2016, John, Microsoft introduced a technique where we could move Windows clusters to a brand new forest, and I use this technique all the time for my customers. And so I've got a link to one of our blog posts that's the case of migrating an Azure Stack HCI cluster to a new Fabric domain. We've detailed step by step that entire process of moving existing clusters, so kind of remediating and fixing a problem at hand. And this is just such an important starting point for security, because your security is only as good as your weakest link. And if you continue to operate in an environment that has a whole bunch of holes in it, you're going to have problems. So
absolutely. And if you don't mind me jumping in here,
yeah, no problem.
I want to, you know, really reaffirm to everyone that I totally agree with the assessment that the longer your AD, your identity management solution, has been in place and running, the more likely it is that you are already compromised. And how much you're compromised is directly related to how long that system has been running. So if you've been running Active Directory since, say, Windows 2000 days, when it first showed up on the scene, you probably have way more compromises than you think, or maybe even are willing to admit. And by getting a fabric, by getting a separate management identity management system, so I know I used management twice there, but what I'm really talking about is you have this separate identity management solution that's governing the accounts that can control your Azure HCI stack clusters. So control your hosts and your nodes and that sort of thing. And the other thing about that, as Dave alluded to, is that you could have this huge, diverse user community where turning on MFA is a political nightmare, right? So it's not a technological nightmare. It's one of getting, first off, management to buy in, and then developing a plan for how it's not going to disrupt operations and all that kind of thing. Well, that could be a long-term thing, and I'm a firm believer in MFA everywhere, but that could take a lot longer. Whereas if you have this separate identity management solution with minimal management users in there, turning on MFA is typically not difficult. It's something that, you know, Dave, you and I have done in minutes, right? The whole process of turning it on and enabling it and creating conditional access policies in Azure and that sort of thing, and then testing it out took us less than an hour for all the admins. So it's a huge deal, and we can't recommend that enough. And Dave, now I'll I'll jump back out.
Well, and along those lines as well, just the number of administrators are required inside of the fabric. Well, the fabric is really, your most sacred environment. It's where the Holy Grail is kept. If you're going to get into the fabric, you're going to be able to get into the underlying domains that live underneath. So you really don't need a lot of administrators inside of there. I like to actually talk to my customers about almost having only break glass accounts almost inside of the fabric, because you shouldn't need to go into there very often, except for, just core management capabilities, like restoring some of your infrastructure and making sure that everything's running. So it's not a daily driver type domain like what you'd have for your normal infrastructure. So a fabric
Yeah.
is definitely a must. Now,
And if they don't agree with the, hey, we can't keep it just break glass, my feeling is, well, fine, then let's start there. And as you prove you need something else, then we can add that in. Because the fact of the matter is, we've all seen this. Once someone has domain admin rights, they are loath to give it up. They will fight you tooth and nail to give it up.
for sure.
So if you don't assign it in the first place, you don't have that fight.
Well, and John, I often get asked the other question as well, is that, okay, fine, you've built the fabric, but building the fabric is just a start. So when we talk about a fabric, let's just clarify what that terminology is, what that actually means. It means you standing up a fresh Active Directory forest and domain, having a couple domain controllers, separate DNS, all of that stuff runs your fabric resources. And that's where all of your Hyper-V hosts, your clusters, your backup targets, all of that stuff would live. And so locking this down and protecting this is a very important part. But you're going to ask me the question. It's, well, I have no idea where to start. I'm not a pro at Server 2019 yet. I don't know where to start. What are all the recommended security settings? How am I going to pass this upcoming security audit that we're having coming through? Well, introducing the Microsoft Security and Compliance Toolkit. This has all of the pre-built group policies that you need to lock down that environment, from your domain controllers to your member servers. And the good news is that I have tested this against Azure Stack HCI, specifically the third one from the bottom, which is the Windows 10 and 1809 and Windows Server 2019 Server Security Baseline. I've tested that and it works, okay, with very minimal configuration editing inside of there. It's not going to blow up your Azure Stack HCI clusters, okay? So from my testing, I put this out on multiple different customers, and everything's been running fine for us. So the important part about that is that, listen, we've got a way to actually further lock this down, which is great. But then it comes the operationalization part of this, is that how do I ensure that I stay protected? How do I ensure that my servers are up to date, my Azure Stack HCI infrastructure is up to date, and all my VMs that are running underneath are up to date? Well, as you may or may not be aware, Microsoft included antivirus starting with Windows Server 2016, and it was called Windows Defender Antivirus. It was an offshoot from their endpoint protection solution, their forefront endpoint protection solution that started to come out with System Center Configuration Manager, and it was just eventually baked right into the operating system. Now, the cool part about this is that it is actually baked right into the OS. You don't have a third-party download for it. But if you don't have what we call Windows Defender Advanced Threat Protection, which is an add-on, I feel that it's almost like you're using a freemium version of the product, right? You're not getting the enterprise feature set. So what you need to do is the rough cost right now, and please don't quote me on licensing. I hate even putting a number inside of there, but the rough cost is around $15 per server per month. And what it does is it builds this into what I would call an enterprise security suite from the freemium version that you would be working with. And so it is a definite must. If you're running Windows servers, you need Defender Advanced Threat Protection. The onboarding process for Server 2019 is incredibly simple. You can get your older servers in there as well, but there's a little bit of additional work that goes on with that, and we'll talk a little bit about the onboarding process, but this is a definite must for you. All right. So when we talk about moving into this fabric, John, and operationalizing and securing Azure Stack HCI, this configuration is not enough, right? we need to do something called operationalizing the team. And maybe you can speak to this for a moment, because this is one of the intangible parts of every IT project that I find that a lot of our IT pros struggle with. This is moving away from the speeds and feeds of the technology into the people and the personality of what's going to take and is what's going to roll out long term. This is what I call the beyond the 30-day deployment plan. This is from day 30 to the end of year 5, right? So the end of your 60 months technology life cycle. That's the operationalization part. This is when your consultant walks away and your team is left with the support of said tools. And what are some of the important parts of operationalizing technology specific to Defender ATP that we've learned, John?
So it's kind of ironic that we're talking about this here in this conversation, because anyone who's attended one of my talks over the last couple of years, whether it be at Tech Mentor or Live 360 or MVPDays events, has often heard me kind of pose a question to the audience of who here considers themselves IT security professionals. And usually just a handful of people will raise their hands, but a bulk don't, right? They think, oh, I'm a developer, or I'm a help desk admin, or I'm a network admin, but I'm not really a security professional. And my answer is wrong. Everybody who currently works in IT is an IT security professional. The fact of the matter is, security is so pervasive and so important now that there is no aspect of IT where a knowledge of IT security isn't necessary. I don't care if you're in development, or if you're in the help desk, or if you're in a management role, you need to have some operational understanding of what IT security means. Otherwise, your organization is at a higher risk than competitive organizations, and that is a bad thing to have. So operationalizing is a critical component of any fully vetted security plan for an organization. And by operationalizing, I mean, Dave, you and I have done this a lot. It involves a lot of conversations, a lot of training, a lot of lab time for the team so that they can see what this looks like. And then a phased approach of getting them into the administration cycle of the live production environments. You don't just drop them in and go, here's your credentials and hope it works out, right? See, hope is not a strategy. So we can't do that when it comes to security. We have to take a methodical approach of getting them up to speed and then letting them prove that knowledge through lab examination and then live fire exercises, if you want to think of it that way.
Well, and these templates that we're going to show here as well, these are just some of the ones that that we've built, because this really didn't exist prior to us going through this project, not that I've seen out there anyways. I've got a question for you. Are these templates, these samples that you're going to be taking and showing here, John? Are you going to make these available on your GitHub repo as samples for the community?
Absolutely. I'm excited to do that, because as I mentioned when we were kind of in our intros, communication is key. And these templates that you and I have created create a 3-tiered process for communicating with users, management, the security team, the HR team about what's happening in the environment, right? And what's important is you take these templates in advance after you've created them, get buy-in from your executive management teams, your HR teams, because what this does is it sets a baseline and a very specific procedure for what's followed for cascading security events. Hey, when a user's PC or a user's account triggers an alert, the first time, this is what we tell them, this is the information we share, this is how we respond. The second time, this is the information we tell them, this is how we respond, this is who we add into the communication process so that they can be involved. And the third time, same kind of thing, lather, rinse, repeat. And to give an example, in the last environment you and I set up, the first incident, that of course goes to the user. It also goes to the local IT team and the corporate IT team. And then it also goes to the local HR manager and the local office manager. Now, if that same PC or that same user triggers a second event, the information goes to that same group, but now we add in the corporate HR team. And on the third time of a subsequent incident, then it goes to the executive management team along with the executive HR team to make a decision on what is the appropriate action, right? And in that organization, they have, laid out in their employee manual what the punishment for improper use of IT technology is for users. But this way, IT doesn't get in that position of, hey, you're treating me wrong, or hey, why did you treat me more severely than Janie or Johnny over there? Because you're treating everybody the exact same. Even the words you're using are exactly the same.
Well, and then I think there's one big piece that goes along with this as well, John, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to share some samples of, just general IT policy and procedure, because this goes into the acceptable use agreements and stuff that our teammates are going to have before they can do anything on the network. And so that's also a big portion of this, and we make sure that we send those out as a copy with every one of the incidents that we have, because it's not just about setting up the malware protection solution. It's about the intangibles that are in behind, about what do you do when you get an incident. And I'll use that word very clearly, not if, when you get the incident, because you will get an incident. We found very quickly that once this was deployed, that we saw incidents coming through. And this is what the ATP alerts would look like. So this is a sample of an ATP alert that had come through, generated from the Microsoft ATP infrastructure. And basically this one here was actually pretty current, wasn't it, John? This one here was May 10th. That was just yesterday that this one came through. And it was some auto run malware was detected. Now this alert happened to be on one of our Windows 10 machines. But the nice part about this is the setup and configuration that you'll have for Defender Advanced Threat Protection for your Azure Stack HCI infrastructure is actually exactly the same as your Windows 10 infrastructure, correct?
Yes, and I want to throw out there that May 10th was a Sunday, so Defender ATP and the communication isn't just limited to work hours on work days. It's 24/7, 365.
And then this is where we get into the guts of, what I consider this is a real gold nugget, John, is the template email that you've crafted around, the compliance policies. And this is what we were talking about, is that, listen, we need to have a notification chain in here now because something has happened. There's been a security incident. So this security incident, why don't you walk us through a little bit of your thought process as you were crafting this?
My pleasure. So first off, this is for an initial incident. So I want to take the approach, I want to have the tone that this is just an honest mistake, right? This isn't somebody actually trying to work their way around the system or do anything nefarious inside the employee's day-to-day. It's just the employee made an accident. They clicked a link they shouldn't have. They went to a site maybe they shouldn't have. Whatever, but we're going to take the approach that it was just an honest to goodness mistake. So it's important that we give that tone, that we don't come off as threatening or as a big bad ogre that's kind of coming to stomp them. So you'll notice that we use some terminology that helps us set that tone. Like, unfortunately, and even at the bottom we talk about, hey, these are the best practices, and we're going to get a hold of you and we're going to answer any questions you might have. So we're setting that friendly, we want to help you tone that hopefully allows the person to not get their defenses up and shut down, but instead they focus and they really try and learn. So as we begin in the email, you're going to notice there's 3 spots there that I've pulled out with arrows where I immediately share information from the Defender ATP portal. And this is going to include information as a type of malware that was detected, right? The progression chain of that malware. So, hey, it arrived on my PC, and then my PC tried to infect these 6 other PCs, and maybe those other PCs were across a VPN network to another organization. We're going to show that here in the screenshots. And we're also going to show any of the particular files that it tried to run, like the auto run and that last alert. If the account was running as a local admin, Defender ATP will show us that as part of the incident, as part of the alert. And there is a specific paragraph in here that covers that, right? Hey, in violation of IT policy, your account was running as a local administrator. Notice the tone of this is a little more stern because Dave, you and I both agree on this. When something is running as a local admin, that is a much, much bigger deal that requires a stronger, faster response, I guess is the best way to put it. So,
well, and I think that's a good piece to point out as well, is that the Defender ATP alerting mechanisms through root cause analysis capabilities of the tool actually allow us to tell exactly what user was logged in, what type of credentials said user had while they were logged in. Even if it was a service account that was executing something, we can go right back to the moment and second as to what was happening, and then also collect investigation packages because, you know, if this was a malicious attempt, you're going to be talking about some type of legal actions that you're going to be having to take surrounding this, and you have to collect all of the evidence.
yeah, and if you're to the stage where you're implementing the entire Microsoft Threat Protection Suite, where not only do you have Windows Defender ATP, but you also have Office 365 ATP and the Azure ATP side, right? This is going to tie into quarantining email chains, right? Because maybe you need to lock that down for possible litigation later on, or understanding the identity management concerns. A great use for Azure ATP, for one thing, is to see where somebody is maybe using a domain admin account to run services across your HCI clusters. That's a big one. That we've found a few of those, haven't we, Dave?
Oh, what was the record that we had, John, for a domain administrator account running applications?
It was in the hundreds.
Hundreds and hundreds of services that were running under the context of a domain administrator account. And
Yeah,
it
because
was,
remember that particular domain admin, every time he set up a piece of software or configured a SQL server or whatever, he's just using his domain admin account.
yeah, exactly. All right.
So to finish this off real quick,
Sorry, I'll get back.
we we cover, and again, we set that nice friendly tone of, hey, we're sure it's unintentional. Here's some key points. So before a member of the IT department contacts them, before they have to open up any of the policy documents that we've also attached, they're going to get some key pointers like don't click on links from unfamiliar sources. Don't try and open any attachment that has particular extensions, right? Don't share your username or password with anyone. Basic stuff that unfortunately a lot of users, because their job hasn't really pushed them to know basic IT security, their job is something completely different. They may not have this at the front of their frontal cortex of their brain or whatnot. So we're going to put it right there in front of them. And that's the basics of this alert. And like I said, it not only goes to the teammate and the IT teams, but also to local HR, local management, so that they're aware that this has happened. Now you can move on to the next.
Awesome. Absolutely awesome. Okay, so the Defender ATP Experience, it comes in the form of a portal, securitycenter.microsoft.com. In fact, today, if you're watching this video, I highly recommend it. Go securitycenter.microsoft.com. You can see if you are set up for this. If not, there'll be a little bit of an onboarding experience. You can start a trial for the service inside of there. And you just basically have to set up a Security Center trial with Azure, and you're good to go. Very, very easy onboarding process. docs.microsoft.com also has a very good set of robust instructions on how to set this up. In fact, we've also authored a book on this, John, Defender Advanced Threat Protection for Server 2019. We document that process as well. And that's not the goal of this session to get into it, but this is where the portal comes in. The portal gives you a very rich and robust experience for managing the security landscape via Defender Advanced Threat Protection. Now, in order to have your Azure Stack HCI infrastructure talk to Defender Advanced Threat Protection, we need to take and we need to onboard these machines. Now, we have the ability to take and to onboard them manually via script. We can onboard them via group policy, or we can onboard them via common configuration tools like Config Manager or Microsoft Intune if you're set up to manage your servers with that. For your workstations, obviously, if you're pushing this out en masse, you're probably using some type of a configuration tool. John and I have used all three methods. They all work extremely well. All right, so let's talk a little bit about, before we go into a sample incident here, John, about the Microsoft Digital Security and Risk Engineering team and what I'll call your partner in security, because it's nearly impossible for us as IT professionals to stay on top of every single security incident, alert, trend, tactic that are out there. We need a partner in this. And Microsoft, if you're running Microsoft operating systems, if Microsoft is already your trusted platform, you're already using Microsoft Azure Stack HCI, it just makes sense to use the Microsoft security solution in behind this. Microsoft has an integrated solution where it's not just the Windows servers. It's also integrated through Azure. You get the AI components with that. It's also integrated through Office. You get complete visibility into what's happening inside of your network. And probably one of the coolest parts about this is watching the proliferation of malware as it attacks something inside of your infrastructure to see exactly which machines, which accounts, what lines of code it's actually trying to execute across the network. In fact, we caught one that was wrapping some PowerShell, right, John? And inside of the PowerShell code, we could actually see exactly what the malware was attempting to do.
Yeah, that was really cool to be able to see it to that detail. And I will throw in here that part of that, like you see along a lot of these tiers, you have security incident and event management seem listed. And to just show how much Microsoft is investing in making sure that all this ecosystem is in place for you, you know, Azure Sentinel is really coming onto the scene, which is cloud native SIEM that you can use to integrate and all this. So that's another big part of it. And it really shows how Microsoft, if you have a Windows-based environment, you know, they're really going all in on creating a security team for you and security resources for you.
So John, I have a question for you. The day of an attack happens. Unfortunately, it's today. And we feel that we don't have the level of knowledge or understanding in order to take and to work our way through this. One of the key pieces of advice that I have to give to our listeners right now is that Microsoft actually has threat experts that are available as part of their security operations center. You can engage them through the portal, through the securitycenter.microsoft.com portal. Let's say that we had one of those alerts like we saw on the previous slide pop up and it's bad, it's spreading, and you know we don't really know how to stop it and we need help. The threat experts portion of this is something where we can engage Microsoft and it alerts them to say, listen, we've got something critical going on inside of our tenant. Let's escalate, let's get some help. So that's there, that's available for us. In the event that you do have something like a ransomware attack that's proliferating through your environment, most organizations, and I'm going to call out one vendor here, Veeam Software, because I just had to work with them in February for another customer case. They actually have a dedicated cybersecurity and ransomware team that's available for you. So just be aware of that. Most of your vendors that are out there are going to have some type of cybersecurity response team that will be available to help you. with whatever products it is that you purchase. So don't just feel like you're left on your own because, like I said, security is very big, it's very broad, and sometimes you just need help. Don't be scared to call in your vendors because they probably already have teams that are available waiting to help customers with these situations when they come up. All right. How does Defender help us? Just a quick slide on this. Deployment and management. It gives us a portal, enterprise-like configurations. It scales. It's got cloud scale with Microsoft. Precision and speed is something I'd really like to touch on here, John, because we have had a chance to extensively play around with the isolation capabilities that are available. So for example, let's say that we have a incident inside of our Hyper-V farm, and a Hyper-V host or node or something like that is compromised. Is it possible for us to restrict access to that? And how fast does it occur when we hit the isolate button?
It's absolutely instantaneous if the machine is still connected to the internet and can receive the command. But even if it takes some time, that's because the machine isn't connected, and it will be instantaneous when they connect back. And so think about that for a minute. The machine's off. Well, if it's off, it's not harming anything. But as soon as it turns on and connects to any network with internet connectivity, so even if the user has taken it to their house and boots it up, it will instantly receive the isolation command and lock down, right? And it can either be locked down in entirety, or we can leave Outlook and Teams communication so that we have a way of communicating with the teammate. But I know, Dave, you're in my own preference is to isolate the machine completely until we know what we've got going on, and just call the user on the phone or reach out to them so that we can have a more interactive discussion than email provides anyways.
And there's a back channel where the Defender ATP portal can communicate with that resource that it's managing, but it prevents it from spreading and causing further harm. From an Azure Stack HCI perspective, I would caution the use of that button because you're going to instantly take a node offline and stop all network connectivity. So you will break RDMA, you will break anything that's going on, storage spaces, direct and Azure Stack HCI related. So you just better be darn sure. If it's a VM that's running inside of Azure Stack HCI, feel free. You can knock that off the network, no problem. But if it's actually one of your nodes that's causing issues, the Defender ATP portal doesn't understand how to differentiate between an Azure Stack HCI node and just a PC that's out there or a server that's out there. They see them all as just Windows devices that they're managing. And so just be very careful with the options to lock those things down. So that's why I wanted to bring that up. Okay, so John, we're at about the time where we're going to have to wrap up soon. So why don't we show what a sample incident would look like? I think this was originally demoed at Microsoft Ignite was one of the first places I saw this particular example. And so John and I have a lot of use cases like this ourselves. We've seen many, many, many forms of alerts come through. But let's take an example of somebody trying to hijack rEVserv 32. So we see that alert pop up like what you would have seen in the previous slide. We come into the portal. Inside of the portal, what we would do is we would click on the alerts. And so the alerts would show what's sitting inside of the queue, and we would click on that, and it says something has happened here with the Microsoft command line utility rEVserv 32. It looks like something malicious has happened inside of here. There might be some malware, and it's come in through through user init, and something's happening, right? So you can take a look at just kind of exploring your view through the queue. As we come through the queue, we can see that there's an incident graph. And so there's one really important part inside of here. And John, I'm just going to see, I was going to draw in here. Let me just see if I can grab my pen here real quick.
Well, while you're doing that, let me throw out that these are the screenshots that you're going to take and include in those template emails, the screenshots that you're going to see through these next few slides.
Yeah, exactly. And so this one here, what you're missing is it's kind of grayed out here. That's a computer name. That's the source of infection. This is a remote computer. These are all remote computers. These are all remote machines that this thing has attached to. And so it looks a lot different when these are not grayed out, but this would be a SAM computer account name, SAM computer account name. All of these would be computer accounts, and we can see that the same command run, and it would tell us the time of execution, everything inside of here. But that's an important piece of this as we take and we go through. Let me just go back to normal. And next. Oh, I got to get rid of my drawing here, John. Hold on. Erase all drawings. There we go. Okay. So now this thing's attached, and inside of here we can also see inside of here there's a bunch of things that are grayed out, like the usernames and things like that for the actual machines that are being attached. And so another thing I wanted to point out, just here where it says the logged on users in the last 30 days. This will show you all of the user accounts. And what's one of the things that we look for inside of here, John, especially on our workstations that are out there, because you should not be doing this, is logging in and seeing domain admin access accounts that have been logged into this workstation. Highly privileged accounts logging into workstations. I can also use the same thing for servers, because why are my accounts logging in all over the servers? We should use the principles of just enough administration and remote access on these things. We should not be seeing a bunch of local accounts logging in. Now, we're trained right-click jockeys, so we like to log in and Control-Alt-Delete, but this is very important. We can see all of the users. Under the Actions pane here, you can start going through and doing your collecting investigation packages. We can see the builds. This is an example against a Windows 10 machine. You can see other really important information like the IP address, because now I can tell if this attack occurred while this user was over a VPN, especially in today's realm of COVID and things like that. We want to know if this is a remote or if this is something on our LAN that's taking place. And so this is really important. And then we can see the actual user accounts that are executing. We can see what's going on, and we can see the alerts going through here. Okay. So that's just one really important part I wanted to point out, because we're graying that out. Now, John, I'll let you point out this one, because this one's kind of neat, because in the example here, we're drilling into this is called our timeline view, where we can actually see what's going on at what time. And we can see that something nasty happened with RedServe 32 at around 8:20:29. And we can see that RedServe 32 tried to run a command line. That looks a little weird, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it tried to connect to an external resource, right? That's a big one. Grab a DLL from the internet.
And so we've actually seen this, and this is really important from an investigation package perspective, especially if you're managing the firewalls, because now maybe you can actually block access at the firewall level to these particular resources as well, right? And all of this plays true for your servers as well. This is not just Windows 10. This runs exactly the same way on Server 2019. We've seen it straight across the board. Okay, and then we can.
Yeah, and it's a great point you make about being able to use this information to integrate other security remediations, right? This is why we call it a security team, because it's not about a single solution or a single person. It's about communication and collaboration to achieve the end goal. And to do that, you need to involve those network administrators, those firewall administrators, those server administrators, and those workstation administrators.
Here's us just checking the URLs, so we can go through the portal and check the URLs as they're being hit. And that's about what we've got for this particular session. So with that, everything's compressed at MVPDays Online. On behalf of John and myself, guys, thank you very much for attending our session. Tons of additional resources up on our blog. John is actually a resident blogger up on our blog, checkyourlogs.net. To date, almost 1 million views up there and over 600 posts of IT Pro related information. And our last resource that we have for you is all of our books that we have. The big thing, I don't know why I put a Bitcoin icon up there. That's funny. So our MVPDays Scholarship Fund, this is something that we're really proud of. It's something that we can do to give back to the community. All of our proceeds from our books, and I've just given a sample link up there. You can just search LeanPub if you want. Just go ahead and search my name up there. You'll see all of our books. We've got close to 20 up there right now. All the proceeds of that go to our MVP Day Scholarship Fund. To date, we've given out 2 scholarships. The scholarships are valued at $10,000 each. And we're so pleased that we've been able to take the proceeds from those books and have a way of giving back. It's our way of helping out our future generations of IT. I really hope you enjoy the rest of MVP Days here. Once again, on behalf of John, myself, and the MVP Days crew, and all Microsoft MVPs and everyone in the community, stay safe out there. And thank you very much for attending and watching MVP Days online.
Thanks, everyone. Stay healthy.